We are just waiting for a couple of minutes for everyone to join. Post that, we'll start.
Good afternoon, Siddharth. Good afternoon, Vishesh. We'll just wait for a couple of more minutes for the other panelists to join, and then we'll start.
Yeah, no worries.
Hey everyone.
Hey, Ankit. Hi. We're just waiting for more panelists. We'll be starting shortly.
Sure.
Ashish, I think we can start now.
All right, sure. Mr. Amit Kumar Agarwal will join us shortly. In the meanwhile, we'll start. A very good afternoon to everyone present on this call. My name is Ashish, and I, on the behalf of Backwaters Committee, would like to thank everyone for being a part of this panel discussion in Backwaters'22, with our theme being India, the Unicorn Hotspot. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our panel, the esteemed guests who have joined us today, who will be leading the discussion and will be sharing their valuable insights with us. Starting with Siddharth sir. Siddharth Pai is the founding partner, the CFO, and the ESG officer at 314 Capital. 314 Capital is an early stage venture capitalist fund house based in Bangalore. It has cumulative assets under management of over $300 million, exclusively in Indian alternative investment funds. 2 of their funds have been named as the top performing Indian VC funds by Preqin. Some notable achievements by 314 Capital include Licious, Coup, Darwin Box, and Open, amongst others. Siddharth completed his Bachelor's of Commerce from St. Joseph's College of Commerce in Bangalore and is a qualified chartered accountant. Next, we have Mr. Ankit Malhotra. Ankit sir is the co-founder and CEO of DineOut. He started DineOut in early 2012, and through multiple acquisitions over the last 8 years, he has been successful in positioning it as the largest dine-out and restaurant tech platform in India. Ankit sir's specialities include e-commerce strategy, scaling up startup, understanding and interpreting online customer behavior, launching new product lines, and forging mutually beneficial alliances across networks. Ankit sir has done his undergraduate from the University of Essex in Computers Telecommunication Engineering and is a CFA charter holder. Next, we have Vishesh Rajaram. Vishesh sir is the co-founder and managing partner at Special Invest. He has a decade of investing experience in enterprise technologies. He has been actively involved across the life cycle of venture capital investing, from deal sourcing, building networks, and investing to monitoring, creating value, and exit engineering. Before Special Invest, Vishesh sir was a principal at Venture East, a more than 100 million early growth stage fund. His vision for Special Invest is to build a VC firm that stands the test of time. Vishesh sir is a qualified chartered accountant and holds an MBA from the Indian School of Business, where he ranked in the Dean's List. I'll take a minute to wait for Amit sir if he's with us.
I have joined.
Thank you, sir. I'd also like to introduce Amit sir here, a banking and finance veteran with over 15 years of experience in management consulting and strategy. Mr. Amit Kumar Agarwal is the co-founder and CEO of NoBroker.com, the world's largest peer-to-peer real estate portal. He's responsible for defining and guiding the overall vision and direction at NoBroker.com and spearheads the company's corporate strategies. India's first PropTech unicorn, NoBroker.com is a disruptive brokerage fee property search portal that connects house or property owners and tenants and buyers directly by eliminating the middlemen. Amit sir is an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. I'd like to take a moment to thank all the guests who have joined us today. And now I'd like to hand over to Harshit to proceed with the questions.
Thank you so much, Ashish. A very good afternoon to everyone present here. Andre Game once said, human progress has always been driven by a sense of adventure and unconventional thinking. With this, I would like to introduce our topic for today's panel discussion, which is unconventional businesses. It has been a strong 2021 for India if we talk about the unicorns that have emerged in the country. The year 2019, 2020, and 2021 saw the birth of maximum number of Indian unicorns, 9, 10, and 44 unicorns coming each year respectively. Although COVID-19 has caused a great amount of socio-economic sufferings globally, it is only during these times when the resilient Indian entrepreneurs have worked effortlessly to contribute to the economy. It's raining unicorns has been the motto of year 2021, with 44 unicorns pumped up in the ecosystem and many soonicorns or soon to be unicorns waiting in the line. So far in 2022, we have already witnessed the birth of two unicorns, namely Mama Earth and Fractal Analytics. As of 14th January 2022, India has owned to 83 unicorns with a total valuation of more than $277 billion. Although traditional sectors such as fintech, e-commerce, supply chain logistics, internet software, etc., do dominate the arena, a strong wave of unconventional businesses such as cryptocurrencies, space tech, data management analytics, etc., is making its place on the list. Unconventional sectors and subsectors marked an entry into the unicorn space, including NBFCs, conversational messaging, cryptocurrency exchanges, D2C, cloud kitchens, and many others. Today, the Indian landscape is replete with unconventional entrepreneurship stories. From Nakul Kumar's Kashify that provides customers with the best price for their old used gadgets to Bangalore-based Boria Vista startup, which offers packaging of basic necessities for people on move in the bundle. In unstable times like the present scenario, there are crucial lessons to be learned from the unconventional entrepreneurial stories. Now, we would like to pass on the stage to our panelists, starting with Siddharth. Sir, we would like to know your views on the current boom happening in Indian startup space, which has led to so many unicorns in 2021, and how unconventional businesses have played and are also expected to play a role in this whole development.
Happy to Ashton. So first off, thank you for actually inviting me to this. During my college days, I actually used to actually visit the IIM campus for the Backwaters Fest itself. The fest that you guys had was actually fantastic, especially the quizzes and the quality of the culture of the organization and the institution really came forward. And I'm really glad you're actually continuing that in the online space itself without actually sacrificing or compromising upon the quality itself. And the hallmarks that actually makes this a fantastic event. So Harshit, to actually answer your question, I think it's important for us to actually just take a step back and to understand why exactly do Indian startups actually have their moment in the sun as of now. We're actually, I would say, towards the end of the longest bull run that's ever come up in human history, starting all the way from 2009 onwards. After the effects of the great crash, the Indian economy, the world economy as a whole has actually seen the stock markets actually increase considerably, and this has been bolstered by the fact that there's been a low interest rates regime since the quantitative easing measures of the Federal Reserve starting off from 2008 itself, and ever since the pandemic began in the year 2020. The first instance of all the central banks around the world was actually lower interest rates and had to pump the entire system with as much liquidity as possible. We actually have record high amount of systemic liquidity around the world, with the central banks actually pumping in $25 trillion in terms of stimulus itself. And despite that, the global GDP is actually decreased from about $87 trillion to about $84 trillion between the years 2019 to 2020 itself. So despite a large amount of money actually going in, the real growth across the world in terms of the creation of products and GDP is actually reduced. So because of this, we've also seen the bond deals of close to 28 trillion out of $42 trillion worth of bonds actually have negative yields as of now, which actually goes to show that growth actually became a scarcity throughout the entire pandemic itself. And given the global amount of high liquidity, most of the liquidity was actually chasing returns. So we've seen a large amount of investors actually reallocate their portfolio from bonds and slightly more safer instruments to actually start looking at stocks. And from stocks, not just in terms of the capital markets itself, where the P's were actually eye-watering, but the growth wasn't exactly picking up. We've actually seen this happen go towards startups itself. And startups, not just in India, mind you, but across the world. Even the US for that matter, actually had added the highest number of unicorns during the year 2021 compared to any other year in its entire history. They have close to about 480 to 500 unicorns, if I'm not mistaken. China itself actually added 72 unicorns during that same year. And the Indian unicorn count has actually doubled during the fact of that entire year itself. So there's a high amount of liquidity across the entire world right now that's actually chasing growth. And growth through the more conventional means, in terms of your physical infrastructure, in terms of physical goods, has actually reached a logical conclusion on that particular path as of now. But now that the narrative has actually changed, because digital has actually become the new realm of reality, and the term metaverse is actually entered into everyone's consciousness as well. And very soon our consciousness also will actually be going into the metaverse, which is what most of the people actually want. We're actually seeing an entirely new greenfield expansion actually happen in terms of economic potential worldwide, and startups are actually at the forefront of this entire revolution. And I do believe it's going to be the unconventional businesses that you actually spoke about, not just in terms of the digital businesses, but also in terms of physical businesses that actually operate in the real world. And these are the unconventional businesses actually going to become the champions of tomorrow. If you look at 30 years ago, Microsoft, I don't think was just actually starting off in the 80s. Apple was a curiosity. For that matter. But if you actually fast forward to as of now, these are actually become the giants of today. So the unconventional business of today will actually become the giants of tomorrow. And it's the job of investors such as myself and my other colleagues on this call to actually find these particular businesses and to actually get them to grow. And the world's asset allocators, because of these record low interest rates, have also been chasing this alpha, and they finally come to a conclusion that startups as an asset class can actually generate that alpha in a more sustainable way. And this is a decade, I truly believe, where alternatives can actually go mainstream.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering that question. And also the fact that you brought into consideration the unconventional businesses, that takes me to the next question, which kind of also relates to what you have answered. So now talking about companies like Cred, which in spite of burning cash have been creating value because of the ownership of data. Now, this is a kind of business which no one had thought beforehand. And earlier, a decade back, no one had even come up with such kind of businesses. So my question to sir, both Vishesh sir and to Siddharth sir, would be that on similar lines, sir, how have you as an investor been viewing such value creation by these unconventional businesses as an investment opportunity? And is it true to say that there a lot of times value creation has been taken precedence over money making for unconventional businesses? Vishesh sir, if you could go ahead.
Thanks. Firstly, thanks for having me, Shit. And for the rest of this conference, you can call me Vishesh. It's just a lot easier that way. You can drop the sir. I'll pick up on the second part of it, and I'll then come back to the main question on specifics to Cred. I think the second part of your statement essentially referred to, can value creation take precedence to your revenue or revenue numbers, if I get that right? And in the context of talking of unconventional businesses, we'll have to go with the fundamental assumption that you'll have to have non-standard metrics to evaluate unconventional businesses, right? And talk about a couple of companies that we work closely with. One of it with Siddharth. One is a company called Agnikul Cosmos. They make rockets to take satellites to space. Right. Another is a company called E-Plane Company, which Siddharth and us have sort of done together. Both of these are companies that are very unconventional. One that's saying that they want to be the first private space company. They want to build small rockets to take satellites to space. And the other one that's essentially saying they're going to be the next Boeing 2.0. They're making small electric planes, right? And both of these are businesses where you're not going to see revenues for the first 24 to 36 months of your business. When you then go out to build unconventional businesses, you have to create alternate metrics or alternate yardsticks to measure progress. Like in the case of Agnikul, our progress has always been, have we been able to 3D print engines? Have we been able to print these engines sooner, faster, better than what is standard in market from a time frame standpoint? And are these engines firing? In the case of E-Plane, and Siddharth and us have taken the approach of saying that, hey, before we see the full plane, we want to see a subscale version of it fly, take commodities and goods before you start taking human beings, right? So we'll have to go with the assumption that if you're building all of these unconventional stuff and you're doing true innovation, it's going to take its time. You're not going to have revenues from get-go or profits from get-go. And a large piece of our job as investors is to understand and underwrite that risk of uncertainty. Specific to Cred, and Sid's done a lot more fintech, so I'll pass it on to him. But my 2 cents is I think they're playing a long haul game of saying that credit card penetration in this country is going to go up quite significantly, and they're essentially onboarding the latter part of the credit card life cycle, which is what are people using the card for? How can I monetize the data coming out of it, and how can I facilitate the payment or repayment cycle to it, right? And along this, once you get enough data, you can build a larger financial services play of lending or treasury or everything else around it. So clearly, those are long haul games, and I think there is clearly value creation happening on the data front and customer understanding front. But with that said, I'll roll it over to you.
So Harshit, to actually answer your question, given the fact, I just sort of harken back to what I said previously, we're actually living in an era now of historically low interest rates itself. Now, any entrepreneur where there's so much liquidity that's actually chasing growth, any entrepreneur that can take advantage of this, raise a large amount of capital because the rates are actually quite low, invest that into his business that can actually scale up and grow over time. He's actually being the smartest amongst the lot. India has always suffered from a scarcity of capital throughout its entire recent history since independence. For the first time in a very long time since liberalization, there's a large amount of capital actually chasing a smaller number of businesses. So this is a place where entrepreneurs actually become king, and any entrepreneur can actually exploit this distortion of interest rates, can actually succeed to a large extent. If you've seen as of now, where interest rates are actually threatening to rise due to the inflationary pressures caused by the large amount of liquidity sloshing around the entire system, most of the valuations of the tech companies, etc., that have actually listed have actually crashed. And as any student of finance will actually know, the value of any asset is actually its future cash flows discounted by a certain rate of interest. Now, beyond any student of finance, as any 600 student can actually tell you, the moment the denominator actually increases, the sum result will obviously end up decreasing. So for all the students of finance who actually know it's basically future cash flows divided by 1 plus interest rate raised to the power of time. If the interest rate increases and the cash flows actually don't, your valuation will obviously decrease. And we're seeing this happen in real time right now across the listed markets itself. The unlisted markets, thankfully, are a lot more forgiving compared to listed markets, where ability to actually generate price change happens over a longer period of time as opposed to short-term measures. So companies such as Cred, the unconventional business actually coming up, can actually increase it over time. And from Cred's perspective, he's actually timed his business beautifully as part of that. And he's actually taken advantage of the low interest rate to actually raise large amount of money, come out with fantastic ads, become a household name throughout the entire industry. And then there are various other monetization avenues that are actually present for him. Don't be mistaken, there's no company that exists as of now, including the companies that Vishesh actually spoke about in terms of ePlane, guys who are doing deep tech, in terms of Agnikul, etc., that will not generate cash in the future. No investor is ever going to invest into a business that doesn't have the ability to actually generate cash itself. It's just that the time horizons, because of low interest rates, have actually been extended to a far longer period of time. And we take the example of Cred. Cred is actually a fantastic business because he's truly understood India as a whole. India, when everyone looks at India as a nation of 1.3 billion people, India can actually be sliced up into a whole bunch of smaller nations in itself, from a demography perspective, as well as from a TAM perspective as well. In terms of market addressing, there are about 150 million people in this country who are extremely fluent when it comes to English. And these are the kind of people who will actually who are entering the workforce right now. First time they're actually getting credit cards, and they're actually been digital natives. Or they've actually been people who've actually earned a large amount of money and actually looking for quality services to come to them without having the friction of any sort of human interaction or the normal friction in the entire transaction chain itself. So Cred is actually accurately targeting those top 150 million people, the cream of that. That 150 million people, mind you, is actually half the population of the US itself, which is a significantly large market. And if you actually take the 150 million people, their per capita income is actually many times higher than what the average of the entire nation is. So that specific slicing that he's done and the way he's catered to the market does give him an inherent advantage compared to people who actually want to broad base it. So that specification actually feeds into the unconventionalness of his business and has actually warranted the high valuation that he has as of now, which only continue to actually grow in the future itself. And if data is the new oil or data is the new sunshine for that matter, the person who has the credit card data and the cost centers of the top 150 million people in this country has an unassailable advantage that no one else in the country can actually enjoy. And that gives him the ability to actually scale up further thereafter.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for answering this question.
Just call me Siddharth, please don't call me sir. Huh? As Vishesh also said, I think I can speak on behalf of everyone on this panel right now to say, just call us. The moment you say sir, it makes us think we're back in college and we're actually speaking to a prof or something for that matter.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for making that environment so friendly for us as well. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to bring Ankit into discussion. As we know, Dynode was in itself a type of unconventional business at the time of its launch in way back 2012. So we would like to understand that as an entrepreneur, what were the kind of difficulties you faced and the early responses which you got in your journey, and also how the current market has been welcoming such unconventional businesses.
Hey, Arshit. Thanks for having me over, first of all. Let me start with that. I think that's a great question. So when we started off in 2011-12, right, that this is way before the sort of the mobile revolution took off in India, right? it was really difficult to sort of think of starting up as such, right? So I don't know if you guys know a lot, but at that point in time, startup was sort of no one had heard, like, no one wanted their kids to do startups. People didn't do startups. So the background went that so I was in London for a very long time. I was an investment banker there, and Sahil, my co-founder, he was in the US at that point in time, and we'd been using OpenTable, DocTable, etc. And we used to come back to India, and we used to realize that there was services like this didn't exist at that point in time. So that was the origin of trying to start Dine Out, where we thought, India is going through this massive phase of opening up. More and more people are sort of now exploring, moving to the bigger cities, are exploring different cuisines, etc. And I think there's going to be a phase where people are going to want to eat out a lot more, etc. So that was the whole origin of starting Dine Out. And as you rightly identify, right, it was a really difficult time at that point in time, because obviously we started with an online, we wanted pure online, right? And I still remember, like, we started with an online platform on the 29th of February 2012, and on the 1st of March we decided that we had to set up a call center in India, because no one was there online, right? At that point in time, there weren't enough people. So we had to follow where the people were. We had to set up a call center. We had to move to this entire infrastructure of answering calls, advising people where to go out, etc. And obviously we've seen the internet, we've seen the mobile revolution around 2014, 15. I think that was the time when startups really sort of started to take off, and especially the Modi government came into power, and all of a sudden there was huge influx of capital coming in, and that is, I think, when the market started to take off. Startups started to do well. A lot of startups, that was I think the phase of probably 2014, 15, 16 is probably where there was crazy capital available, and startups became a household name. And we've seen a lot of unconventional startups, and obviously, so the point I'm trying to make is that was the point when we also decided to pivot, and we went from a pure online, like a table reservation platform, to a tech. We pivoted to a complete pure B2B tech play as well, where we started to build softwares for the restaurant industry. So today we're the largest software provider of the restaurant industry. We control the entire chain for a restaurant, from the point of sale system to CRM systems to basically the supply chain management systems, etc. Right? So that was a pivot we were able to make, and that's another important point, right? Like, as a business grows, you realize you go deep into the ecosystem where you're present. You realize what the needs for the restaurants are, or of that particular industry are, and how you sort of grow. And so from 2014 onwards, we did multiple acquisitions in the B2B space to go deep into the restaurant tech. The business on the consumer side continued to grow, and we made a few acquisitions on the consumer side as well. And business till 2019 end was great. And then we all know what happened in 2020 when the pandemic struck, and I think the restaurant industry across the world was the hardest hit, without doubt, right? For all of a sudden, overnight, restaurants shut down for a long period of time. So we went from doing great business, and we have this festival called the Great Indian Restaurant Festival, where we get crazy discounts to consumers at like 50% off, no holds barred for the entire month So in February 2020 we had this festival, and we were probably at a highest numbers ever. And then March 2020 we just went to a standstill. And coming out of that, obviously, was really challenging. So the last couple of years has been quite challenging, but that is in my opinion, that's where the opportunities lie as well. And I'm not talking just from a Dine Out perspective, but from a startup perspective, right? The last major crisis that the world saw in 2008, when the financial meltdown happened, that actually saw after that, the era of 2009, 10, 11, we saw some of the largest internet companies which exist today take off during that time. And now again, 2020, 2021 is when we are seeing huge influx of new startups coming up. And at Dine Out also, we saw opportunities to grow. So we acquired a company called Stepping Out, and now we're transitioning into this entire event space, because our belief is that coming out of the pandemic, right, people have been craving to go out of their houses. People have been craving to meet their friends, families, etc. And there's going to be this new influx of, or not, I would say influx, but basically people are going to place a lot more emphasis on experiences. and on personal sort of enjoying themselves a lot more coming out of this and spending a lot more money on experiences. So, there's going to be this massive shift in how people spend money that we're going to see over the next couple of years, where people will probably be either a work from home environment or working from different locations. People are going to be doing a lot more life experiences per se to really make up for the lost time. And I think that's the opportunity that we saw, and we're going to see a lot more conventional businesses come out of the next couple of now already and over the next couple of years. So yeah, it's definitely interesting times to be there. And just to add, the consumer demand is back, right? So in December of 21, we were 3x of our pre-pandemic level, because it was just crazy the amount of people who were going out and the amount of money they were spending. So the point is, it's a cycle. The 2020, early 21 was a low, and now we're again coming out of it. In the next couple of years is definitely very exciting.
Thank you so much, Ankit, for this detailed explanation about this whole journey of yours. Now, I would like to invite Amit into the discussion. So, nobroker.com has been a disruptive idea in the real estate industry. Hence, you had also faced some sort of severe challenges in the beginning involving legal notices from brokers, as you mentioned in Economic Times interviews as well. Therefore, sir, according to you, how should an entrepreneur who has some sort of disruptive idea, they should prepare themselves for an entry into an industry which itself has a high entry barrier, taking an example, say real estate, sir?
There is no way to prepare at all. You can assume that anything and everything will happen, right? From some random guy sending you legal notice, or some brokers, a group of broker trying to threaten you, or some government department suddenly waking up and trying to make your life difficult, or for the matter, some demonetization or some COVID or pandemic like COVID just appearing out of the blue. So I think to answer your question, is there a way to prepare? I don't think. It is more like that quiz which used to happen at 2 p.m. in IIM, that you think that you are prepared for, but almost always you are not prepared for. And as an Indian entrepreneur, perhaps the trick is to be always be ready for anything which can go wrong, and have some buffer. So mentally not be flustered by any challenge which may come, and try to be more rational, as rational as you can, because whenever you are faced with any trouble, I think the way which works is to keep the emotion aside and quickly attack at the problem in the most rational way. And thirdly, to be more practical, have some buffer. So for example, anyone who has some amount of, if you are faced with a problem of attrition, it's better to have some buffer of employees. If you have some problem in terms of, if there can be a problem in terms of your runway, it is better to start raising funds before you are too close towards finishing your funds. So to answer your question, I think Indian entrepreneurs are, it's almost a must-have quality to be ready with any surprises, and to deal with them in terms of either creating buffer or and be emotionally ready to handle them.
Thank you so much, sir, for the answer, sir. Now, I would like to pass it over to Akhil from Backwaters Committee to take over the discussion forward.
Hi, panel. I'm Akhil. I'll be taking up a few more questions. For the next question, we would like some context from Ankit and Amit first before we hear from the young sharks. How important were the first few names in your cap table? How did you get them on board to your large and unique vision?
I think this is a good question. And I think, so I'm going back to 2012, right? At that point in time, when we started up Dine Out, we had absolutely no thought of raising money from anyone, because, that the environment wasn't like that at that point in time. The only thing that we always focused upon was customer service. So we ensured that whoever reached out to our platform, we were able to give him the best customer service possible. And we did that. We were relentlessly at it for first 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And it so happened that one of our customers really loved the service that we were doing, and that's how we started talking to our that customer. And then eventually that discussion turned into an investment thesis, because those guys happen to be the founders of a company called TBO, which is actually now going for an IPO. So they were our first investors at that point in time, purely because we focused on customer service, and we managed to raise that first round of angel check from them probably 6 months after starting the business. And after that, I think I think once you have that first couple of good names on the cap table, then they help you open up a lot of doors. And from then on, it's been great for us. And we managed to get Times Internet on board, and they've been great investors as well so far. So and now for the last 4-5 years, I've been actively investing in the startup space. A couple of, for example, one of my latest companies is called OneCode, which is now raising money from a slew of high net worth angels. So I think it's important definitely to have good people on your cap table, because it not just demonstrates that, obviously, it demonstrates basically trust in what you're trying to build, and they help open up a lot of doors. So yeah, so that's my 2 cents on it.
So as far as I'm concerned, to be truthful, when we raise funds, we did not care who's giving us money. We pretended as if the investor mattered to us. We went in the meetings and told them how important you are and how much value you will add. But actually, we wanted to just get money. And we did not want any interference from any investor. We didn't want any ज्ञान. हम कहते हैं हमें अपना काम करने दो, आप बस पैसे दे दो, आपको वो काम है, हम अपना काम खुद कर लेंगे. So my true intention was just to raise money. I don't care about which investor is, what is the name of the investor. A few years later, now I have some, thankfully or fortunately, it didn't work against us. Now my opinion has changed from my own experiences, fortunately all positive. So we raised fund from SAF, who turned out to be, who are now called Elevation, who turned out to be great supporters, great investors. But at that point of time, we just wanted to raise funds. Then we got funds from BNext, which was a very small investor, and we were not sure. So Teru is the guy who basically leads BNext, and we were like that we have already raised 3 million. Why do we need a 0.2 million check from some guy in Japan? But we took that money because we thought, let's not say no to money. But 5 years fast forward, what we have realized is that, and this is my basically suggestion to all the students also, that see, when you run a business, all types of pluses and minuses happen. And some months are good, some months are bad, some projections work out, some don't. And you need investors who support you and who don't panic for small things. And there are plethora of examples in founder community as to how a panicky or a over-worried investor has just made the company go down the drain. So it is extremely important that the investor supports you, genuinely believes in you, and just getting money is not enough. To give an example, Teru from BNext is one of the smallest investors, earlier at least, on our cap table. But the amount of support and blind faith that he has in us, and the way in which he has helped us over the past 6-7 years, I think if he just calls me and says, jump out of the window, I will jump. That is the level of affection that I have for him and all my co-founders. So, and that relationship gets built over months and years of going through good and bad times. So yes, so I would say that it matters hugely the person with whom you are working, and more than the fund, and even more the person with whom you are working.
Interesting views, sir. Yesterday we hosted Pranav Pai, and he mentioned how hard it was to manage large capital at a young age and why he wouldn't recommend it to anyone. So my next question is to Vishesh and Siddharth. It's how did you go about gaining trust from family officers and your fund LPs? Also, Vishesh, we would appreciate some stories. I believe Dulquer Salman was an early supporter of Special, and we have a lot of fans here.
Well, I must say you guys have done a lot of due diligence. A lot of my LPs are out there. Well, I think the child is still, less than 5 years old. We're on our second fund. We possibly have about $40+ million of assets under management. I think a few things we've learned in this short time frame on investor relationship is that, first things first, our life isn't very different from that of founders like Amit or Ankit here, right? I mean, we at the end also have shareholders whose money we're managing, um, that we've undertaken. 70% of our LP base of people that we've known for the last 7 to 10 years who've been repeat LPs across both our funds. Like I said, we're still very, very early in our journey. We're not institutionalized yet. We think of ourselves as still a startup in the venture form. But I think the step in building some of these relationships with family offices or large families or conglomerates is building a trust. The second piece is also going out with a strategy and executing on that strategy, right? For example, we call ourselves to be deep science and fund, and to a large extent, about 60-75% of our portfolio falls under the unconventional category of funds. And there are many a times where we see great companies and great founders, but we know that it's one thing to make investments. It's another thing to build a strategy and live to it and manage it and execute to it. So I think the other piece of core as far as investors or investor management is to essentially execute on the promise or the vision that you're going out to say, right? And importantly enough, communicate as much as you can. And I think in all of these cases, we have anywhere between monthly touch points to quarterly touch points to make sure that we pass on everything that we're learning, doing, and seeing to our investors, because we're in a very uncertain world, right? A fund like ours typically has about 18, 20 companies. We're supporters of them, but we know we're not the ones driving the car, right? We're at best a passenger in their vehicle. And being very cognizant of that, our job then becomes to make sure that we set the right expectations, we manage expectations, and we communicate enough. I think these are two things. One is trust, and two is execute on the strategy, and three is to communicate. As far as Dulquer Salman is concerned, I mean, the truth be told, he's a classmate of mine. I've known him since he and I were kids in school, in high school, and that's it. And that's the reason the trust goes back a long way, and he's an early partner. Great. Sid, I'm sure you'll have a more detailed answer, just given how large you guys are and how long you've been. So I'll be happy.
Yep. Oh, thanks, Vijay. So we've actually been in existence since 2016. We actually started off initially with a corpus of 500 crores, and we're entering 2022 with an assets under management of over $300 million actually. So we've actually been through this entire phase, and we've had the unique distinction of actually launching a fund during every single calendar year of our career since 2016 itself. One of the takeaways, as my other partner Pranav and my brother also actually mentioned, investor management and investor relations is never easy at all. The only times during which is easy in case the firm or the company or the startup for that matter are actually doing exceptionally well. When times are great, nobody ever bothers asking questions. It's only when times actually go bad does everyone actually wake up, everyone actually asking questions, and the entire thing actually goes through. So investor management is no longer about managing the peaks or the troughs. Investor management is a continuous ongoing exercise that the company needs to actually maintain, or the firm or the entrepreneur needs to maintain throughout their entire life cycle itself. You speak to any of the investors over here also, all of them do actually have, any of the startups here on this call as well, all of them would have maintained very strong channels of communication with all their partners itself. Because uncertainty is actually the greatest anathema to capital. And the most frightened people are actually investors. Capital, at the end of the day, it's actually cowardly. Capital can actually take I would say, business risk or specific risk, but any sort of other risk that actually comes in, capital actually ends up flowing away. If you look at it, the very threat of interest rates actually rising, I've actually called FIIs in India's public markets to actually become net sellers over a number of years. Sorry, over a number of months during 2021 itself. So that actually shows that even there have actually been occasions, and this is actually well documented itself, where even the choice of words by one of the central bankers, be it India's RBI or the US Federal Reserve or the ECB for that matter, have actually caused the markets to actually rumble. As part of that, investors are extremely jittery. So calming down their nerves or actually defraying this is actually a key reason to actually maintain open channels of communication. That's number one. Number two, which I actually do believe is more important. All the theses upon which you're actually working, either as an investor or either as an entrepreneur for that matter, will actually go through the vagaries of normal business. As both Amit and Ankit have already mentioned, their businesses have actually seen tops, their businesses have actually seen bottoms, their businesses have seen everything that's happened in between itself. And given the fact that the moment you're actually dealing with capital, and especially from a perspective of an investor, our inventory is actually capital. If you actually think about it, the money sitting in our bank account does nothing for our investors. The money sitting in our bank account does nothing for our companies. The investor at the end of the day is actually an intermediary between larger pools of capital that exist, as well as people who actually require that particular capital. So the moment that money that actually sits in a bank account actually ends up being a sword of Damocles dangling over your head. So the timing effort that actually goes in terms of the entrepreneur inspiring you with confidence that the money that you actually give them can be used for the business actually becomes imperative. I mean, the happiest entrepreneur that any investor can find is they can actually fund the guy. They can actually meet him once a quarter. The only thing it says is, yes, the business is going up. You see all the business going up, and you never actually have to speak to them. In fact, one of our early investors actually did say that. He said the best businesses I have actually, and he's been investing in the Indian markets for the past 25 years. He's actually based out of Singapore. So the best businesses are the business. I ask them how they're doing. They say they're doing well. I attest the fact they're actually doing well. I don't want to talk to them thereafter. I can actually continue my business itself. That's the least amount of friction throughout the entire transaction chain. And that friction, that I would say subdued friction can only come through communication, can only come through transparency. The moment your investors don't actually trust you, no matter what document you may have, no matter what you've actually signed, your entire career will actually head into a tailspin itself. And we're seeing this actually play out right now. And we've seen this play out multiple times in the Indian SARA ecosystem in terms of battles between entrepreneurs and the investors. That fundamental erosion of trust, no matter how good the business is going or how good the business is actually going, will actually lead to irreconcilable differences and ultimately lead to the business actually falling apart. We've seen this happen in the listed space. I'm fairly certain most of the people on this call are aware of how it's actually affected the unlisted space itself. So keeping these three things in mind will actually hold you in very good stead as time goes by.
So a follow-up question right now for both Siddhartha and Vishesh. Now that we have already heard from Amit and Ankit of how their journey was of raising funds for unconventional businesses, how different or difficult would you say it is to evaluate the unconventional businesses, given that already Vishesh has mentioned that, for unconventional businesses, unconventional startups, standard metrics cannot be used?
Yeah, so yes, I can actually take the first stab at that. No investor has ever made money by actually doing what everyone else does. So no investor can actually make money by actually funding conventional businesses in itself. It becomes next to impossible. So even if you think, most of you, since you guys are actually doing MBA for that matter, would have gone through a fairly rigorous finance course. The moment you try applying any of those metrics to early stage investing, you will not be able to make a single investment throughout your entire life. A large amount of mainstream finance that all of us are actually taught is purely contingent on look at past performance and trying to actually extrapolate the future. Whereas the first lesson you learn in finance, or first lesson you actually learn in investing, or even by watching mutual fund ads for that matter, past performance is not indicative of future performance. So the way in which you actually been taught finance and the way we actually apply finance are actually miles apart in itself. And even when it comes to early stage investing, especially, even more compounded by unconventional businesses, there are no heuristics that you can actually fall back upon. If you look at the case of either Dine Out or No Broker, these were completely unconventional, completely out of the box. Anyone who actually look at the business, try to figure out what sort of parallel are you. They won't be able to find a parallel. So there's no anchor to actually anchor your biases onto and to actually start creating fundamental assumptions. So given the fact that you're actually approaching it from a purely greenfield perspective, there are no biases that you can actually harbor. So that actually becomes number one. Number two, most importantly, when you're actually investing in businesses for that matter, more than the business, especially early stage, more than the business, you're actually taking a bet on the person or the entrepreneur. The greatest risk in early stage investing is not competition, is not actually change in regulation, is not actually change in interest rates, pandemic, etc. It's actually the human capital risk that you're actually taking. If the entrepreneur decides one day he no longer wants to run that business, whatever money you put in, whatever metrics they have, everything will actually collapse as of that day itself. There is no investor who invests in the business for the privilege of actually running it. The only one you can possibly think of has actually been SoftBank and WeWork, and everyone's seen how that's actually played out as part of that entire thing itself. So human capital risk is actually the greatest risk when it actually comes to investing. So making sure that you're comfortable with the founder of that particular business and in their ability to number one, grow the business. Number two, deliver what they've actually promised. Number three, hire a strong management team and to actually create management bandwidth that allows the company to actually grow. For every founder that you may think of, be it a Baiju, be it a Kunal Shah, be it a Jiten Gupta, be it a Vivek from Licious, or anyone else for that particular matter, there's an entire team that actually exists behind them itself that's actually making that company grow. The cult of the founder, the cult of personality is more a marketing gimmick than it is actually anything else. At the very onset, it's the most imperative part because the culture actually does get built around that particular founder itself. But in time, any smart founder will always de-risk the business from the concentration risk that actually comes by making everything contingent on that particular person. So human capital risk actually becomes a very, very significant portion of what actually happens. The third part that you actually need to look at, which also feeds into the entire investing framework that more early stage investors actually do pursue, is the ability for the founder of the business to actually pivot. More often than not, in the early stage, product market fit is a distant dream that everyone actually has for that particular matter. They're just people who actually started off on the basis of either an idea, a hunch that they actually have, and they're still actually building out the entire product in itself. So the ability for the founder to actually think laterally and to actually change their course midstream actually becomes important. If you look at, for example, you look at any other companies that have actually become large right now, all of them, if you speak to the founders, all of them have actually undergone fundamental pivots throughout their entire business chain itself until they could actually find the area that they could actually find a sector they could actually attack and they could actually end up conquering as part of that. So these are the three things that you actually need to keep in mind, when you're evaluating these companies. And lastly, which I think is also going to be important, is the investor needs to actually become the ambassador for the company and to actually convince other investors about what they actually see. The narrative and the storytelling aspect of early stage investing cannot be understated in basically by any means or form. Even Ashwath Damodaran has actually gone on to say that essentially the numbers actually support the narrative. It's no longer that the numbers actually dictate what the company is actually going to do. The narrative becomes more important. Amazon that way had a fantastic narrative. For the longest period of time, they had marginal or negligible profits. They've actually become one of the largest companies in the entire world right now, despite the fundamental equation in terms of finance, in terms of discounting future cash flows, still actually applying to him the same way it applied to an IBM, the same way it applied to any of the other companies that they've actually exceeded. So these are the things that actually become important and essential in the toolkit of any investor actually looking at early stage investing or investing for that matter.
Thank you, Siddharth. Before opening up the floor for further Q&A, I would like to ask a question all of us here must be having. Does an MBA help? Or to put it in a better way, how has it helped in your journey? To throw some context to the audience, Amit is from IIM, Vishesh from ISB. At the same time, Ankit and Siddharth have made it here even without an MBA. And I request the panel to be most blunt about it.
Do you want to go first? You want me to go? Happy to.
Go ahead, Vishesh.
So I must confess, I went to do an MBA at a ridiculously early age. I went when I was at 22. So I gave little and I got a lot. I think if I reflect back now, 15 years, I think the biggest takeaway for me was an opportunity to network with some very high quality human beings. So I think to me, that was the biggest takeaway. The fact that I could be with 400 odd people and could learn like the biggest learning of my life, which was that I will never be the smartest person in the room, right? And early on, did fairly well academically. So when I went to business school, I thought I was a really smart kid. And then I ended up being with just 400 odd people and they were all smart in their own way. And my biggest takeaway was, hey, you can never be the smartest person in the room, but can you try and find a way to be useful? And that's a good starting point. So that's what I learned. You don't have to necessarily go to business school to learn that. And hence you've got enough successful people who don't have to go through that path, but I did, yeah. Thank you.
Should I take the next?
Yeah, I don't have much more to say.
Sure. So because we are talking to the IIM students, so I would say it has been hugely beneficial. Let me say why. So I am not getting into the discussion whether can you be a great startup founder without MBA or not. Of course you can. And there are umpteen number of examples. You don't even need to be an engineer. You can be anyone. But having graduated from IIM has been extremely beneficial from me. yes, when I was in IIM, the things which mattered to me, and I'm sure many of you can also resonate, was how much grade am I getting? Am I going to be among the top 10 percentage or not? What type of salary will I get? Whether I will get into day 0 or day 1 or not? That was all the focus which was there when I was in IIM Ahmedabad. And I'm sure many of you basically think that whether Kozhikode is good or whether Bangalore is good or Ahmedabad is good. I think as an IIM student, it is perhaps natural to think that. But let me tell you, none of that matters. The thing which basically is hugely beneficial coming out from IIM is two things. One, that because of the IIM brand, it is easier to get the doors open and get meetings with investors. So that is because generally you have proven that you have cracked CAT, and hence you have qualified that intellect level that investor will call you for the meeting. It doesn't. So at least that one door is open. And second, and the biggest benefit is that once you have this IIM brand, it is the brand which is called life, and it allows you to take risk. Somehow our system is such that the entire process is over focused on getting good salary. That somehow can you get the day 0 salary, can you get day 1 salary? But don't you guys think that the fact that you are from IIM ensures that you are going to get a job for the next 40 years every time? You leave your job and start something of your own. You come back after 2 years, you will always get a job. It might be a lakh rupee more, it might be a lakh rupee less, but this brand of IIM ensures a job permanently for next 40 years. What an amazing privilege it is. And it's a huge privilege. And unless you use that privilege to take some risk and do what you really want to do, then what's the point? Was this brand just for taking a 20 lakh rupee of loan of education loan to get some good salary? You would have gotten a good salary elsewhere also. In no broker, I think the top salary earners are perhaps non-IT and non-IIM guys, tech guys. So when I was studying in IIM, it never occurred to me. I was too much busy in local optimization, my grades, Ahmedabad versus Bangalore. But the global optimization is that you have got a brand which is always be with you. And if you as an IIM graduate cannot take some risk in life, then think about a guy who does not have any pedigree worth mentioning. How can he take risk? So this brand is basically opens door forever, no matter how old you are, and gives you a huge risk appetite, which is a waste unless you really use it. So that's my submission.
All right. So my view is probably going to be very different, and I hope it could appear it could sound controversial as well, but just to some background and context, right? So I had my first job at the age of 21 at an investment bank. So I was at BNP Paribas in London, 2006, and I was coming onto the graduate program. And I remember I was part of a batch of 6, and there were people who someone was an MBA from Cambridge, someone was from Glasgow, someone was from LSE, and here I was just a undergrad in computers and telecom engineering, right? So that was my first experience, and I never thought that because I don't have an MBA, I'll never be able to get that job, or I'll never be able to compete with those people. In fact, it motivated me to perform to actually work a lot harder, because obviously there is that whole mindset that, if you've done an MBA, it's you're probably a lot smarter or better, etc. So I had to work a lot harder to prove myself. However, I think when I started Dine Out, right, and my co-founder Sahil is actually an IIMK graduate, but I genuinely think that in India over the last few years, students who are getting MBAs from some of the top colleges in India have a sense of entitlement, or they feel that they have a sense of entitlement when they come out of college. They think that their salary should be a lot higher. And I'm purely talking from a startup context, right? Where I was able to do a startup, raise funding, etc., without having an MBA, and my co-founder has an MBA. So, was it good or bad? I don't know. But the fact, what I'm trying to say is that I've seen people without MBAs being a lot hungrier, being a lot more passionate, trying to, working a lot harder. And on the flip side, I'm not trying to diss an MBA. Please don't get me wrong. I think it's a great sort of, it's a great degree to have. But I think, in fact, what, Amit just mentioned, I think people who probably gone through an MBA, in my opinion, their risk-taking appetite actually becomes a lot lower, because in my opinion, they've actually, invested, 2-3 years of their life into studies. It's a huge financial commitment that they've gone through. And because of that, their first thought is that how do I get that back, etc. Obviously, if you're an IIM or ISB graduate, obviously you will, doors will probably open for you. But I think it's not that just because you're there, doors open. I think at the end of the day, as a startup founder, what you're trying to build, how you've gone about your business is probably also as important as MBA. And that's the way I personally, honestly, sort of feel about it. So I'm not trying to diss anything, but I'm just trying to say that at the end of the day, the hallmark of a great founder is how he's able to handle tough periods of time, and not whether he has a degree or not, and where he's graduated from, because and it happens both ways, right? We've seen some top MBA students with MBAs build great companies, and we've seen students who've not graduated college build great companies. So there is really no different. There's no way to say that one is better than the other. So that's the way I personally think, and I think doing a startup today is probably the best MBA or a best management lesson that you can sort of go through. You can learn, right? So for me, that's been my, at least sort of that's my thought on it, and my 2 cents on that. Over to you, Sid.
So yeah. So what I'm going to say is having an MBA doesn't hurt you in terms of your journey. I think that's actually doesn't hurt you in terms of the journey, but it doesn't. Outside of being a great conversation starter and actually leveraging the alumni network, the additions that an MBA can actually make to your career actually decays as a function of time. So it's basically like IRR. The less you actually invest into it, the more actually it decays as a function of time, and actually just basically ebbs away to zero. There actually, if you're even a whole bunch of investors also just behind closed doors always say that some of the companies that they actually end up seeing, a number of slides are actually dedicated to the fact that the founders are either IITs or IIMs, and a very few slides actually dedicated to what the business actually does, for that matter. And that becomes a severe red sign to any investor looking at that, saying that if these guys are peaked far too early, there's no confidence that the guys can actually do what they're supposed to. And an MBA, by definition, the purpose of MBA is to actually give you the flavor of an entire business, and to actually prepare you for what you may actually end up encountering once you actually enter the workforce or become an entrepreneur by yourself. You become the jack of all trades, but actually the master of none. And the ability for you to actually start leveraging and actually growing that is purely incumbent on you. If an MBA is a determinant of success as much as your horoscope actually is, or which side of the bed you actually wake up on in the morning, or whether you prefer Boost or Complan or coffee or tea, for that matter. It is just another characteristic that actually encompasses the person that you actually become. And no firm is going to actually, as Amit also said, you will be actually guaranteed a job. If you're a CA, if you're an MBA, if you come from ISB, you come from IIT, or you come from the Ivy League or anything for that particular matter itself. But the question you need to ask yourself after doing an MBA, is just having job security the only thing you actually want to fall back upon? And that actually becomes a hallmark of your life. So the MBA becomes a starting point. I mean, it's a fantastic starting point. It does open up doors during the first few years of a career that no one else can actually do. Very few other qualifications can actually open up. But as a function of time, that actually ends up decaying. And if you don't end up investing in yourself the same way you actually did in order to get that MBA and to order to leverage that MBA, the value that it actually accrues to your business or to your personality is not going to be as much. So an MBA is not going to become the determinant of success as part of it, But it's a nice thing to have. It doesn't rob away from what you'll actually end up doing, but it's not going to burnish and actually put you on a pedestal compared to everyone else who's actually in the workforce.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, for clearing all our doubts. I think all of us must be thinking on the same line, but I think that definitely cleared a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think one thing, Keshav, what an MBA teaches you is actually return on investment. So as Amit was saying, whatever student loan and all, etc., you've taken, make sure you can negotiate. It should get hunger in you to actually negotiate a much higher salary. To make sure you can actually, the payback period should not actually exceed the term or tenure of your MBA. That's actually one of the greatest things that MBA can actually teach you.
That's absolutely true, Siddharth, and I'm sure that everyone will actually follow that. Now, just jumping like before we start Q&A, just one question that I would ask every one of you so that we can, go back to our topic on unconventional businesses. That is, I would request all of you to pick one industry where you see the most unconventional businesses coming up, and how is the scenario changing in that particular industry. We can start with Siddharth, then we can move on.
So with me. So in terms of unconventional businesses, unconventional businesses actually coming up, I think one of the most unconventional businesses that is yet to actually take up or actually pick up is actually businesses that actually cater to the investing space in itself. We've actually seen a number of companies actually looking to make the life of an entrepreneur better in terms of either connecting you with professionals, helping you do your entire business plan, help you make a pitch deck, helping you get greater analytics into your business and everything that actually comes up. But and we've seen this happen for fintech, seen this happen for agri-tech, seen this happen for deep tech also to some extent for that matter, and to every other industry. The one industry that hasn't yet actually been touched for that particular matter is actually the AF industry in itself. Outside of the growth of the startup ecosystem, the AF industry is actually compounded over the past 10 years at the rate of about 108%. 108% CAGR is almost unheard of. From 359 crores in terms of commitments as of December 2012. As of September 30th, 2021, the number was actually about 5.39 lakh crores. Now that entire 5.39 lakh crore industry, unfortunately till date, actually runs on Microsoft Excel and Tally in terms of their backend. So the entire finance world has actually been kept up purely by one company and actually kept up by Excel and kept up by Tally. That's now, as of now, actually migrating onto the cloud. So the guys and the VC industry or the AF industry or the investing industry, despite actually investing in disruption, is the least disrupted industry throughout if you actually compare it to literally anything else. It's also very, very set in its ways, and the same functions are the same formula that actually applied 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago during the birth of modern finance are the same ones that actually apply now. So the unconventional business, there is no business that we've actually seen coming up in this entire space. But the one kind of business I do actually hope that entrepreneurs actually look at is the fact that this sort of industry is actually ripe for the taking as part of it. And this sort of industry is one of those second order industry that actually grows with the growth of the startup industry. And everyone looks at startup and says, wow, no one's actually looking at the guys funding them and say, okay, what exactly do these guys actually need in order to start making their life easier? And the one person who can tackle that, even get a 5% share of an industry that's worth 5.39 lakh crores is going to be humongous and actually dwarf some of the other industries that actually see a lot more competition within them.
Thanks, Sid. I think if I were to pick one unconventional industry or sector that I think could possibly define the next decade, it's possibly going to be climate or climate tech. I think a lot has been done on the industrial side in the last 60, 70 years with a short-term horizon that's beginning to already bite us in more than one way, be it air, be it the water, be it depletion of resources. And I think businesses are now beginning to not think in 5-year, 10-year time frame, but in longer time frames. And we're already beginning to do a bunch of course correction, at least in other parts of the world and slowly here as well. We think there's a lot to do there, and we're working with a bunch of founders looking at building some very unconventional tech and businesses out here. Exciting times ahead.
Awesome. Amit, over to you.
Yeah, so I also think that in terms of the unconventional business, climate and sustainability has been something which has been talked about a lot. But if you look around, right now there are very few large companies which are tackling this problem. I feel that in the years to come, this is not going to be something which is good to have. This is going to be must have. And there are huge amount of opportunities to make good revenue, good market in climate. Especially, I'm very bullish about water in particular. So hoping for better times to come.
Thanks. So the way I think about it, I think the next few years, with the way work from home has transitioned and how everything is going, I think VR, virtual reality, and gaming is going to be probably the sector that's going to define the next 4-5 years. I think it's going to be, and especially we all know what's happening with metaverse, etc. I think there are going to be so much. There's going to be so much that's going to be happening there, and there are going to be such new revenue models that are going to come up. That it's going to be really interesting and exciting. So I think there's a lot of work that's going to be done over there, and we're going to see some really cool, really good startups coming up in that space over the next few years.
With this, we come to an end of our panel discussion session. We'll now open up for question and answer. Before that, I'd like to thank all our esteemed panelists for a wonderful session. It has been really insightful and enlightening to hear you all. We'll take up a few questions from the audience now. Members of the audience may raise their hands and we'll take up the questions. Jotpreet, you may go ahead. Just for the information of the panels, Jotpreet is a member of Financially Yours, which is a finance club of IIMK. It is aimed at promoting and developing interest in finance. Go ahead, Jotpreet.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It was a really enlightening session, guys. My question is directed towards Siddharth and Vishesh. So I just wanted to know, we always hear the good news about investments making so many returns. So I just wanted to ask the flip side. So how do you handle the investors when an investment goes wrong or when your bet does not play out as you think it would? So I just wanted to know, what is the perspective and how do you deal with those scenarios? Thank you so much.
So I can actually go first on that. Losses and gains are actually two aspects of the same coin itself. Any investor who actually invests in the company on the assumption that they will actually end up making money out of this no matter what doesn't actually deserve to be an investor for that matter. So the moment a bet actually does go down or actually does go south, it is actually part and parcel of the entire game itself as part of it, and everyone's actually acutely aware of that as you actually go in. What is most important, however, is not the fact that the company actually went bust or actually lost money. Is the reason as to why that's actually happened, and those reasons or the postmortem that people actually do does actually speak volumes of the character of the firm. Even from our side itself, we have a portfolio of over 60 companies where we have had some amazing companies, and we've also had some fair share of losses itself. Thankfully, the losses have always been in single digits compared to the entire AUM of any of those particular funds. So they've actually been fairly concentrated when it actually comes to that. And most of our reports, for that matter, the post-mortem we've actually done on companies that have actually gone south are actually larger than the notes that we actually written when we've actually exited a company in itself. Because that learning that actually comes ensures that you can actually make new mistakes. And mind you, this industry actually rewards people who make new mistakes. And this industry actually punishes people perniciously as to anyone actually repeats the same mistake over and over again itself. So that's actually the key component that you should actually end up keeping in mind. And to your flip side, is the fact that investors are actually punished in case they have a portfolio that actually has zero losses. Because the question that always comes up in the minds of their investors is, did you actually take enough risk? Or if you're actually taken any additional risk, would your returns have actually been higher? So having a perfect track record or a clean slate is actually counterintuitive, or actually works against that particular investor compared to having some level of losses, provided those losses are actually mitigated, and whatever lessons you learn from those losses can be applied towards making future investments itself.
If I would add a couple of points, as Sid said, at least we tell our LPs we're in the process business, we're not in the outcome business. Outcome of whether a company does well or not, of course, we have a choice to make, which we make at the time of our investment. But other than that, a lot of it really depends on what the founders do. So we are in how do we run a better fund in terms of finding the right entrepreneurs, working with them and helping them build. That's the process that we strive to improve, every day when we go to work. Outcomes, whether we win, whether we lose, those are outcomes and we'll just live with it. But it's important to learn from those outcomes. And as Sid said, you want to avoid repeating the same mistake because that's when you're going to look like a real idiot. But yeah, other than that, keeping communication open and clear with LPs is a great way of unburdening yourself with the moral obligation of returning, great returns. So keep communicating with them and let them know what's going on and what you're learning and what you're doing. And keep reiterating that you're not in the outcome business, because you can never be in an outcome business. You can only be in, an improving process that you follow as a fund or, as founder or as an entrepreneur. Yep. Thank you.
Now we have Piyush to ask the next question. Piyush, you can go.
Hi, thank you. Thanks so much, panelists, for the very insightful session. My question is based on what Amit sir said. So I heard Amit sir saying that at one point he was going just that he gets money whether it was any investor, but paise ki importance thi at one point. But recently I'm watching the show Shark Tank, and I guess many of us from here are, and we are observing that many founders are going for having multiple sharks on board, even if they have to dilute more equity for that. So I just wanted to ask, is it beneficial for having a good name associated with you or specialist people associated with you as a founder? Because what I feel is personally, these people would have invested, would have had stakes in multiple startups and multiple ventures, and they have their own enterprises to run as well. So do they bring some sort of specialization, or the goodwill associated with them adds value? Or one should focus only on getting money and the name does not matter?
So no, the name does matter. So one is that please segregate Shark Tank from the the normal investment pitch. Investors rarely are impolite with founders. I would say out of 100 meetings that I have done, perhaps only one where the investor was impolite, because investors know that they cannot truly judge the idea and the company accurately. So it's basically a game of probability, and hence they also have a long list of companies which they missed investing. So if you go and if you have the investor meeting, I would say rarely would you face any insult or any drama. But of course, Shark Tank is a is a program, so they need to have some drama. So it is a part of the show. But otherwise, investors, even if they believe that your idea is shit, they will pretend that yeah, there's some potential. Why don't you get some traction and then we'll again talk. So don't be scared. Investors give generally a huge respect from that perspective. Second is that, as I was saying, that the individual is important. The company is also important but both are important. If you have got investors who are marquee names, then it's basically a stamp. The same way in which IIM is a stamp on your resume that you are perhaps more intelligent than others. There's no guarantee, but it's a stamp. So similarly, if you have a investor who is more well known, who is more marquee, it helps in future. If you have an investor who has deep pockets and can do multiple rounds, then it means that you have some buffer you can fall onto. And if you do well, you don't need to go and search for new investor, because this investor can also back you. So those practical considerations are there. If you want to get money from a specific individual, be a little cautious. There are many people in the industry who are pretty famous, but they're not easy to work with. So just going for some so-called celebrity investor is not a great idea unless you know the value that he or she is bringing. So don't go blindsided. And of course, should you give more of your equity for multiple investors? Of course not. Of course not. So there is no doubt about it. Of course you should not. The show basically pressurizes you into winning, and actually you end up losing by giving more equity. So of course you should not do it.
Understood. Thank you so much.
One thing to actually add over here, Piyush, no negotiations have never transpired between entrepreneurs and founders the way they actually transpire on Shark Tank. For that matter, that has never happened. That will actually never happen. That's artificial friction created for the sake of TRPs, and every entrepreneur looking at that should actually come that in mind. The moment if you try coming to a pitch and you end up being that aggressive the way some of those sharks actually are, as Amit said, the investor will very politely actually point you to the door, ask you to come back when you have more traction, and then come up with another reason to actually say no to you as part of that itself. So just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind as you guys actually start off your journey also.
No, so Siddharth is right. I'll just give an example. So when we are raising fund for No Broker, we went and we basically asked that. So we had a meeting. Investors asked, how much money do you want? And we said we want 3 million. So the investor said no. So there's no negotiation. They said no. And then we asked what happened. So they said no, 3 million is basically, we are not in that space, and we don't think that we can take that much of a bet on an idea which is not proven, because no non-brokerage It is neither proven in US nor proven in China. How can it work in India? So we are not going to put so much money. So they said no. There's no back and forth. There was no chance for us to say that, okay, not 3 million, what about 2 million? Because they said, hey, you thought about an idea. You came with a number. This number is not okay with us. You can't just change your number in the middle of the meeting. And so then I kept my 3 million sheet aside. I made a new Excel sheet which had 1 million. So I went for the another meeting. And this time investor asked, so how much money do you want? I said 1 million. He said, you have no idea how competitive this industry is. You can do nothing with 1 million. You should have, had you asked me for more money, then it would have been serious. So we think there's a serious issue in the way in which you guys are thinking. And I'm like, hey man, I have both the sheets. So there is no negotiation like this which happens. And of course, in the future, what I did was that whenever an investor asked me, I said, we need anywhere from 1 to 3 million. 1 million will take us to point A, 3 million will take us to point B. Now tell us.
No, what Amit is saying is very common. Yeah, it happens most of the time.
Yeah, actually, just make sure you have a plan for every investor. Make sure you have a plan for every investor, and you have an actual plan for your business that you guys actually look at. Maybe also understand that, see, some of the Excel sheets that you actually come out during your first meeting itself is actually part of the same marketing material as your pitch deck. And there's no investor who seriously looks at, especially in the early stage, who actually looks at an Excel sheet, gets very excited, and then actually ends up investing. An Excel sheet, no Excel sheet has ever refused any number that you possibly put into it. So keep that. That's something that all investors know. That's something that all founders also need to internalize. And most importantly, never ever get high on your own supply. Never ever get seduced by your own Excel sheet and believe that life will actually linearly scale the way your Excel sheet actually does. As part of that, make sure to always come up with contingency plans for your entire race and to actually take advantage of the market conditions as they may exist as at that point in time.
Thank you so much, panelists. That's really actually a good insight, Siddharth. So what we observe on TV is, it's good to know that what we observe on TV, the reality is actually very different from that, and how we should be prepared if we enter into such a situation. That was really a good insight, to not go with a hard number, but rather go with the range and with different sort of proposals for various investors. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anushka, you can go ahead.
Hi all, thanks for the brilliant and stimulating discussion. So this is for all the panelists. As Siddharth pointed out at some point, Cred tapped into the correct 150 million customers. So here my question is in two parts. So apart from the correct target customer segment, what are some of the critical elements that startups pursue to lock in the right product market fit? And secondly, as Ankit mentioned, how Dine Out is now pivoting from the restaurant tech business towards events. And neither Dine Out or No Broker started out as an app. So how often do startups pivot to attain that PM fit? And what are some of the best pivots you've seen in recent times?
So for this, what I would actually say is there's a very simple mantra for this. Instead of fake it till you make it, pivot till you make it. So until you actually find the right product market fit, you have to just keep actually iterating a business and actually pushing that out. See, in this entire dynamic of fundraising, investing, entrepreneurship, etc., it's not the investor who's actually king. It's not the entrepreneur's king. It's ultimately the customer who's actually king. No matter how much amount of money you may possibly have raised, unless there is customer acceptability for what the services or the product that you're actually offering, no amount of capital will actually end up saving you as part of that. And it's purely within the scope of the entrepreneur to actually pivot and to actually make that work. And there are no metrics, there are no hard and fast rules or anything can actually teach or any yardstick to actually give you. Because give you to actually understand when you have to pivot or not. But some of the things that actually help is the moment your customer acquisition cost is actually far higher than the lifetime value you can possibly accrue from the customer. That's not going to end up becoming a sustainable business. You will have to pivot as at that particular point in time. The moment there is zero customer acceptance or very limited customer acceptance, or you're going after a very, very small target market, it stands to reason that you will actually end up having to pivot as at that particular point in time itself. It becomes next to impossible. There's no point actually saturating a very, very small market, because the moment the market is actually capped in terms of the total amount of capital it can absorb or the revenue you can extract, no investor ever wants to invest into a glass ceiling when it comes to a particular piece itself. And the third part that actually comes when it comes to pivot, for that matter, a pivot is something that you need to end up doing during every single stage of your entire life. You look at Microsoft. Microsoft actually commanded the entire desktop industry as at a point in time. It failed to pivot to actually accommodate what was happening in terms of smartphones itself. every single smartphone iteration, including the most recent ones, that double screen or something, has actually fundamentally failed. But one of the best pivots that consequently has actually come from Microsoft, where they said, look, we can't do anything consumer. Our entire DNA is actually enterprise. And now Azure has actually become the second or third largest cloud service provider. And with the acquisition of Activision, Blizzard, and whatever they're doing in gaming, and the fact that they've actually teamed up with Sony to actually power Sony's cloud computing using Azure, has actually seen them playing to that strength. So these are the kind of pivots that you have to end up doing. You're never too old for a pivot. You're never too young for a pivot. You always have to pivot till you actually make it. And unless you can actually change, you will actually end up becoming a Kodak. And the last thing any business wants to do is actually end up becoming a Kodak, a dinosaur, analog system in a digital age as part of that. So the pivoting is actually a fundamental aspect of entrepreneurship itself.
Absolutely. Just to add to that, I think the main point is that, you have to follow where your customers are going. So, you are probably, or most startups operate in or interact with a customer across one touch point, right? But then you also have to figure out what the customers are doing. And at least in our space, it was very important to figure out, okay, if dining out is taking a hit, or if people, what else are our customers doing? How are they stepping out of their house? What are they doing, or what are they looking for when they want to go out of the house? So, and across most businesses, right, you try to find your core competency is something, and then you figure out what your customers are doing and see how you can adapt your business to actually get them across multiple touch points, because that's how that's what's going to happen. And it's the same whether you see it at Swiggy. They started off with just food delivery, but now are doing a lot of things in the delivery space. You credit, for that example, credit cards, but now they're doing a lot on the loan side, on the rent payments, etc. So my point is that most companies are just trying to do that, and the successful companies do that better than the others.
So, Anushka, basically the dilemma is as follows: that when you study in IIM and when you give exams, there's a defined answer which the professor is looking at, right? And if the answer is right, then you get full marks. The psychological problem is that the moment you open a startup, there is no professor who can tell you the right answer. So I'm not sure whether you have heard, but Bezos went to Harvard Business School and spoke about his business, and the students voted that this is just a copy-paste business. Many others are doing it. You can't make much money through books, and you should shut it down. And that's what basically people told. In our case, so we went with the idea. Now, investors said that, see, this has not been done. Non-brokerage has not been done in US and China. So how do you think it can be successful here? And while we defended, we also thought, yeah, there might be some merit in what these people are saying, because they have so much experience, and it might be true. There is something unknown that we are unaware about. Then somebody basically said that nowhere in the world in real estate has a customer ever paid upfront before the deal gets closed, and we need to charge upfront because we are internet based. We can't send goons to recover money. So it has never been done else in the world. So how do you think you can do it? That's a valid doubt. Then somebody said that there are so many strong companies, and if the idea is such good, they will just copy it, which is also valid. So if you are writing an answer paper, then all these three answers are valid, and your prof can basically give you 0 out of all 3. But then we said, okay, let's ask customer. So we basically asked customer all these questions and decided based on that. So I would say that keep on, as far as product market fit is concerned, the final decision maker, the final judge is customer. If you have any doubt, talk to more customers, keep on changing your product till customers like it. And if customers like it, investors will also like it. Eventually, there might be a lag of few months or a year, but they will like it. So that would be my submission.
Yeah, I don't, not in the interest of repeating, but I guess all of us are out here having to build something for somebody that makes a difference for which you can create value. And you have to iterate till you do that. And Amit and Ankit have different customers, Siddharth and I have different customers. But at the end of the day, if you're running a business, you got to build for somebody, and that's and you got to do what it takes, whether you call it pivot or whether you call it something else.
Thanks,
panelists. I think Siddharth chose to answer a question by Ruchika. We'll take that question, and after that, we'll take one last question from Sanath before concluding.
Yeah, happy to ask you. So the question actually comes from Ruchika Agarwal, where she's asking for whether VC investments will be democratized for the common man or not. So the short answer is, I truly hope not. See, the venture capital industry by itself, because of the boom period we're actually going now, where exuberance is actually trumping rationality. Everyone, when everything actually seems good, everyone says, yes, of course, we shall allow everyone to actually invest into it. Why does SEBI have a 1 crore threshold for this? We should actually reduce it, democratize the wealth, etc. But the moment that downturn actually happens, and any investor worth the salt knows for a fact that a downturn will actually end up coming at some point in time, the sheer amount of value destruction and value erosion that can actually end up happening will actually end up crippling a retail investor in itself. I mean, when Yes Bank went down and ILFS actually went down, the market shuddered. Despite actually having a liquid market where you can actually easily exit, retail investors actually struggle to exit as a particular point in time, and they've actually lost a large amount of money. If you contrast that with the startup ecosystem and private markets, there is no liquid market that actually exists. If a company does bad, that entire loss has to be absorbed by you as part of it. And there have actually been situations where entire industries have actually ended up getting gutted. If you look at the crypto ban that actually happened, all those crypto startups, except for the few ones who actually had enough cash to pivot to Singapore for that matter, there was a large amount of value destruction that actually ended up happening as part of that. It became exceptionally hard for anyone to actually recover any money, and that industry still is going to take a large amount of time before they actually end up picking up in India itself, more importantly. So venture capital investments should not actually end up getting democratized for retail investors, because the level of risk that it actually entails is actually far too high. There's a reason why the industry is actually called the alternatives industry. It's not part of the mainstream. It may eventually become mainstream, and there are other avenues to actually get that. But opening the floodgates of that to retail investors will actually be counterproductive and counterintuitive. That's why nowhere across the world are actually retail investors encouraged to actually start investing into startups. It's something known as the accredited investor that India's recently introduced. Singapore's had it, Japan's had it, UK's had it, the US has had it for that particular matter, where there's a certain financial cushion and there's a certain ratio during which you can actually invest. And you need to be a sophisticated investor to understand the risks when it comes to that. But I do believe that we will actually come upon a time where mutual funds or slightly larger managers of pools of capital may actually be allowed to invest a certain proportion of their entire AUM into startups itself, into startups or AIFs or venture capital funds for that matter, to actually generate that small amount of alpha. And that I do believe should actually end up happening within the span of a few years itself. And for anyone looking to actually get a flavor of alternatives, anyone actually does anyone has a private NPS account. The NPS actually allows you to actually invest up to 5% of your total money, 5% total allocation into AIFs itself. So that actually gives you, if you actually look at those returns, unfortunately, I actually spoke to one of the NPS managers in about late 2019, early 2020. They've actually said that they've actually gotten, I think, about 50 odd crores of money as of then, despite this actually being in existence for like 4 or 5 years. So that's a very, very small proportion. So it stands to reason that retail investors are fascinated by what's actually happening, but they don't exactly want to take that monetary risk. And very few of them are actually aware of the downside that the asset class actually entails.
Okay, Siddharth. I'll take one last question from Sanath. Sanath, if you may unmute and speak your question.
Thank you for this opportunity to ask this question. So my question is to you, Amit sir, that I have a real estate startup where we are looking to disrupt the market in Mumbai particularly. And this is something new that has not happened in the industry before. So when you started No Broker and you were trying to do something, because real estate market is majorly dominated by brokers across India, and brokers play an important role in Indian real estate market. So when you say No Broker, you are basically going against a community that is that is major player in the market. So how do you go about it? And do you have a fear of failing? Because you always have this cushion of, I am Bangalore, and you could have always got an easy job. So would you have that cushion, and would you not do the startup because it is too disruptive and you feel that it might fail? And second part of that question is to the VCs, that would VCs not be willing to invest in such a startup which is too disruptive, which is, as you said, it was not done in America, it was not done in China. So when you try something new business model, so how do you go about that?
See, my experience is if it has not been proven elsewhere in the world, it's a negative. So raising funds does take some time, longer time. Second is, if you think that fear of failure is not there, every founder is insecure, is fearful, is full of anxiety, and is always worried. Every founder, no matter whether you are a unicorn or a decacorn or you have not raised any funds. So that feeling can never go. And every businessman has that feeling, because you're running something and unexpected things can happen. So you can, if you are going through this path, that's that's how it is, and I don't think you can ever get away from that feeling. Coming to the real estate question, I think as I said, the final decision maker is customer. The only thing that you should make sure is, please don't pick up a market which is very small. Many a times the customer problem is good to solve, but the market size is very small or some very niche. Then it is not suited for VC funding. It is suited for profitable business without VC funding. So be very clear. Just because everybody is raising VC fund, you don't need to raise VC fund. So make it very, very clear firsthand. And as far as brokers are concerned, we would have loved to make a business model in which we can coordinate with brokers, work with them. Why work against them? Unfortunately, in India, given the dynamics, the brokers will not reduce their charges drastically, nor will they improve their customer service drastically. So it doesn't work out. But if you can somehow find a way, like Ola hired the same taxi drivers for their taxis, then it is awesome. So if you can find a way to work with brokers, it is great. If you can't, then I think just chase customers. And as far as no broker is concerned, see, you don't care whether I am from IIM or whether no broker is a unicorn. If you are looking for a house, you find on no broker, it's a good site. Otherwise, it is shit. You don't care. You will go to a broker. You don't care about my background. You care about your need. If your need is fulfilled, we are great. Otherwise, you don't care that I came and spoke in this forum of yours. So I think same with customers. If you are solving a need of customers, faster, cheaper, better, you will get the business. Else the broker will, and broker should.
So on the VC part, I can actually answer that question quickly. Like I said, no investor ever made money by actually following what other investors do. There is no such thing as a extremely disruptive business that actually occurs. Every disruption is an opportunity for an investor to actually make outsized returns itself as part of it. That's why the very definition of alpha is actually doing something better than what other people actually do. And every fund manager, for that matter, looks to actually generate that alpha for the investors itself. But that being said, there have actually been several occasions where the timing has not actually been right for the idea itself. And there are investors who will actually be very, very open and upfront with you about that. And this could be for a variety of reasons, extraneous to what you may actually doing. The regulatory climate may not actually be conducive for those kind of businesses to actually come up. There may be a glass ceiling in terms of the market, as Amit actually spoke about, that you may actually end up tackling. There may be such well-funded companies in that particular area that unless you can actually raise an equal amount of funding as them, it becomes impossible for you to actually scale up thereafter. Or the market may actually end up becoming so small that it's not really worthwhile. The investor can't actually end up making money, and you actually will actually end up bootstrapping that entire thing itself. Even all the industries that are actually up and coming as of now have actually gone through the same thing, where either one of these issues is taking them time to actually become popular. Even Licious, for example, when we invested in Licious way back into 2016, we were actually the first Indian VC to actually invest money into them. And everyone looked at it saying, this is not an idea whose time has come. There is no purpose. There's no reason to do it. India is a majority vegetarian nation. How can you guys actually do this, etc., etc. They now become India's first D2C unicorn, and they're actually galloping through the entire thing itself. They're actually expanding into a number of Indian cities and actually scaling up. That actually shows that even if the idea, no matter how scared you are, even if other people have actually said no, so long as the entrepreneur believes that can actually get done, and he proves it, more importantly, capital and money and investors will obviously end up following as part of that. But that's why I said the greatest risk of investing is actually human capital. Unless the entrepreneur has it within him to actually buck all the odds and to actually work on that business, the business will actually never end up scaling. And unless the entrepreneur is self-aware enough to understand that they've actually hit a brick wall through which you can't actually punch through for reasons completely out of your control, and they actually decide to either pivot or to start another business as part of it, that actually is the true hallmark of an entrepreneur itself. And that those people, regardless of the idea, regardless of the time, regardless of the lack of capital, those are the guys who will actually end up reshaping the world. And that's a fact.
Thank you, panelists. If the panelists may allow one last question, one person is raising hand. So if I may go ahead with that. Rupadatta, you may go ahead and ask.
Yeah, good evening, panelists. Thank you for this insightful session. So I have a doubt to Amit sir. So as we can see, the real estate sector is booming. As we can see, the pre-orders from the Shobha and all the DLF, they are making a good revenues. But my doubt is, so our no broker major revenue is from the no broker pay, which contributes around 30 to 40%. But if I see how the business model working, I think you charge 1% from the transaction, but what you pay for the banks or the merchant is like 1.5%. So how do we make a revenue from this model? Because all other competitors are also charging the same. So it's like you blink first and you lose the customers. So how long can we sustain this business model? Or we're trying to make some kind of attract to the customers, then we can build around it.
Financial services is a small part of our business. It is less than 20% now, and we are cash profitable in that business. We charge 1%. Our cost is much lesser. So this business is profit after tax, PAT profitable. We are the substantial revenue that we get is from real estate. There was a period of time when there was a lockdown, and hence artificially the financial services business basically contribution rose. But now over the past 1 year, that became lesser, and we basically reduced. We made the charges and the amount in such a way that it becomes profitable. So we are, of course, we are not bleeding in financial services. We are making money there. A large part of our revenue comes from the core real estate, which is from buying, selling, residential, commercial, both. And the rest of the revenue comes from painting, cleaning, packers, movers, home loan, home interiors, insurance, furniture rental, all the ancillary services. But thank you for being worried about us.
Thank you, panelists. With this, we come to an end of our panel discussion session. On behalf of the Backwaters Committee, IIM Kozhikode. I'd like to propose a vote of thanks to our esteemed panelists, Mr. Amit Kumar Agarwal, Mr. Ankit Mehrotra, Mr. Vishesh Rajaram, and Mr. Siddharth Pai for agreeing to do this, that too on a Sunday. So thank you, people. Your journeys are inspiring to the students, and we really enjoyed a lot and learned a lot by listening to you. The staff and students of IIM Kozhikode look forward to hearing you more in the future. We sincerely hope we continue our association, IMK and your esteemed firms, 314 Capital, nobroker.com, Special Invest, and Dine Out. I thank all the attendees who joined us today. Thank you all for joining.